Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Library, where you can read more of the greatest stories in all of the multiverse. I am Jeremy.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. Sorry, Joanna has a little bit of something personal to take care of. In the meantime, it's just me and Jesse here. Jesse, how have you been? We had a little bit of an unintentional break there, but we're back on.
Yep. Well, I'm just dealing with our first freezing temperatures of the year.
Well, in California anyway. I think we should qualify that. If somebody hears that and they're out in Michigan, they're probably just like throwing up a big middle finger to their phone. So, yeah, we are out here in California where freeze happens less often when you're closer to sea level, for sure. But other than that, it's been one of those weeks that's kind of busy. I think I got myself booked into a 10-man tag match for East Bay Pro Wrestling. And, I've just kind of been prepping up. I'm supposed to go to Simi Valley Toy and Comic Book Convention. It's a one-day comic convention on February 9th. So, it'll be an interesting way to spend a day. And then I've also been going over the guest list for WonderCon, which we will talk about later in the show, because I am pretty sure that my book's going to get 2 or 3 new pieces of artwork, as well as my wallet get about $200 to $300 lighter. I can't tell if that's a good thing or not. We'll figure that out, I'm positive. Also working on plans, because I've mentioned it before that a mutual friend of Jesse and mine was supposed to meet me at WonderCon. We were talking about the possibility of like doing a visit to the Disney theme park, since one of them hasn't really been there in like 20 some odd years. Except I know that money suddenly became an issue. Nothing terrible happened. It's just like there's been some home purchases and things have not quite gone the way some people expected.
Mm-hmm.
So there will have to be another discussion had in the relative near future. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, the planning dates, if we want to do this, are coming up next week, so I'm going to need an answer sooner than I expected. But whatever, not your problem. Did you watch the Super Bowl?
I watched maybe a total of 15 minutes of it.
I thought that was a great game. I was hoping San Francisco would win, only because I think Kansas City has a better chance for multiple appearances over the next few years than San Francisco does. But it was still a pretty good game.
Mm.
I was really entertained. Commercials were a bit of a letdown for me this year. There were a lot of bizarre ones.
They tend to be very experimental.
Yeah, but there was only one that I found absolutely laugh-out-loud funny, and that was the Doritos commercial with Lil Nas X and Sam Elliott. It's kind of funny watching two different generations of entertainers try to dance, have a Wild West dance-off to figure out who's going home with a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos.
Yeah, I didn't see too many commercials. I saw make a crossover between home products.
Okay.
And I saw like the tail end of the Marvel shows.
Yeah. I saw that one too, and it only just occurred to me on the drive home today, thinking about that commercial and the release schedule for Disney Plus going into the fall of this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to have a pretty... This may be the first year there's an actual Disney Plus contingent when it comes to San Diego Comic-Con. I know they can show all this stuff off with no problem at the D23 Expo, but they have enough like very prominent pop culture intellectual properties on Disney Plus. I'd really be surprised if somebody didn't try to bring it all by San Diego this year.
If not some of them.
What do you mean?
Just bring some of them and leave some for the D23 if it's happening this year.
Well, it all depends, because let me put it this way. WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier both come out fall and winter of this year, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's pretty much simple when it comes to whether or not you bring that to San Diego Comic-Con to show off to people. Especially since the first series is Falcon and Winter Soldier coming out in August. I mean, that's right before. I wouldn't be surprised if like somebody brought a full episode for viewing at that point. The Mandalorian, maybe that's more of a coin flip, but the second season comes out in October, and I can think of few shows that seem to have captured the attention of a lot of fans as much as that show did.
Got my attention.
It did. I mean, I'm not even a heavy Star Wars fan, and that is easily the best Star Wars story I've ever seen in my life.
Agreed.
So, which is kind of embarrassing when you consider it's just a streaming show. but at the same time, it's very simple to understand, easy to get into, and it's not even that difficult to tell where on the timeline it is compared to a lot of other things that Star Wars has put out. So I think it's just fantastic. However, I have not fallen into the same kind of weird traps that other people have as far as the young baby that the Mandalorian is hanging out with.
Really?
Yeah, it didn't capture my imagination. Not saying it's bad, but it's not like I'm not making a meme a minute out of it because I'm just not that interested in it.
Hmm.
And I have trouble calling it Baby Yoda like so many other people do because I feel somehow denigrating.
And just do what the show calls it, the child.
It makes more sense. I mean, I was just calling it Little Stevie simply because calling it Baby Yoda, it just seems weird to call it a baby version of a character. It definitely is not. You know, that would be like if I called every Korean person I met a different Jesse.
I would hit you real fast.
Right? That's why I have trouble saying Baby Yoda. It's like, that's not Yoda. But that's what we call it. Well, that sounds really odd.
You're just the odd man out then.
Has that ever stopped me?
No.
Yeah. The subject of this week is a retrospective of Transformers comics. We're holding off on Once in the Future until Joanna can rejoin us because we need her help on that. But in the meantime, we will go through the news of the past couple of weeks, and we're going to start with Marvel comic news. These are the stories about the characters and storylines of Marvel comics that, if they're not already out, they are coming pretty darn soon. And first up is an interesting one where in the second issue of the latest Thor series, Marvel has destroyed the DC Universe.
Okay.
I figured that would get your attention. So, the threat in the Thor comics, at least according to Galactus, is something called the Black Winter. It's supposed to be this weird entropic force that just swallows whole worlds, right? The Black Winter is not very well defined as to what it is. It's just that it takes on entire worlds. Well, at the very beginning of Thor number 2, it shows a world where the Black Winter has arrived. And in the exposition boxes, it says your gods will arrive. A sun god, a god of emerald light, a god of dark perhaps, a god of the ocean, of speed, of strength. This universe, like so many before it, is protected by leagues of gods, many of them as powerful as those you've always known and marveled at. And of course you see different visual representations, not of the characters, but of their power effects that are analogous to the Justice League, and this entire world enshadowed. So, I mean, DC tends to use weird analogs of Marvel characters, it seems like, more often, except at this point they just... The veil was so thin it was almost laughable. At the very beginning, when it said, our gods will arrive, you even see something streaking by in blue and yellow, passing by a building that appears to have a large brass orb above it. Which is very much similar to the Daily Planet building in DC Comics in Metropolis.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they were pretty bold about this one. I don't quite know. It's one of those things where, as much as it's an interesting in-joke, I always feel weird when the two companies allude to each other when it comes to Marvel and DC, because it always feels like an apples and oranges kind of conversation. A lot of people like to compare one versus the other, except the two have such different ways of storytelling.
Very.
So it always feels weird when one just kind of takes a spike at the other, because... okay, say it's like if you brought Thor over to the DC universe, it would still feel like a very weird alien place. And vice versa, if you brought Wonder Woman over to Marvel, it just would be so out of place, I don't even know where the conversation would begin.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, a Spider-Man villain has a new job that should scare everyone.
Who and where?
Okay, do you know what the Ravencroft Institute is in Marvel Comics?
I've heard the name. I am unfamiliar with it, though.
Okay, the Ravencroft Institute is where we first met a character known as Cletus Cassidy, who later became Carnage. It is a mental asylum in Marvel Comics, very similar in concept, at least, to Arkham Asylum in DC. However, where Arkham Asylum seems to specialize in taking costume criminals and attempting to turn them into normal people, Ravencroft is more or less the place where you just take Marvel's like worst homicidal weirdos, the ones who are irredeemable, and they're treated. But the primary purpose of Ravencroft is incarceration, not treatment. Okay, it is a functional prison hospital, not an asylum. The problem is, a former inmate of Ravencroft is now running the place.
Who?
His name is Norman Osborn.
Of course, it will be Norman Osborn.
Yeah, last time we saw him, Norman Osborn had used the Carnage symbiote to augment his own goblin abilities and became the Red Goblin. The unintentional side effect was that the goblin serum that kind of makes him halfway insane already interacted with the Carnage symbiote in such a way that after Peter Parker defeated Osborn and got the Carnage symbiote off of him, Norman thought he was Cletus Cassidy. Cletus's personality completely overwrote his. And now we've had the Absolute Carnage storyline where Norman was a scion of, the augmented Carnage, right? Well, now that storyline is over, Norman's got his brain back. And now they've decided that the influence of the Carnage symbiote was the reason why he had his recent freakout, or at least he's managed to use his lawyers to convince people this. So now he understands this place and he is running it. However, what are the odds he's not also using as a base of operations and possible recruitment of, very mentally unbalanced individuals?
Or experimentation.
Exactly. Ravencroft is one of those places that means to help, but it's not very good at it.
I'm just wondering how did that happen? What legal processes and bribes happened to let that go through?
I thought about this a little bit because I haven't read the Ravencroft one-shots that are currently coming out on a weekly basis. Best guess? He managed to spend the time he was head of the Department of Defense and running Hammer and the Avengers, and convince people that everything that happened from the point where he was disgraced up until then was probably some kind of prolonged psychotic freakout caused by him coming in contact with symbiotes. Maybe not Carnage necessarily, but he was hanging out with that alternative version of Spider-Man for quite a while. Matt Gargan when he had the Venom symbiote. He probably convinced people that a lot of his recent freakouts were not his fault. He definitely was provided with interesting cover for it.
That would just seem to me he's easily compromisable.
Yeah. I mean, it may also have to do with somebody deciding, let's put him in charge of this, because at least we can just toss him down the hall if he does something stupid.
I guess you go with the logic of, just keep your enemies close, I guess.
I think another part of that, though, also has to do with Marvel's lack of a large anti-intelligence body. S.H.I.E.L.D. is annihilated, and there's no replacement for it. So there's not as many people to watch these types of individuals. You know what I mean? I'm sure the U.S. government has a list, but they have no way to enforce watching it outside of the usual federal agencies that are more normal. The FBI and the CIA.
So we're trusting Norman Osborn to be some kind of anti-villain?
I guess be better than he was, but we all know he's not he can't possibly do that. His history says he can't. The only problem is we know that history as a reader, not as a character.
To be honest, I feel more comfortable if Otto Octavius was running that place.
Maybe the one that was Superior Spider-Man, not the one that's out now.
Oh, did they revert back all that character development?
Oh, did they ever? I think we covered this at one point. The Superior Spider-Man's been pretty much annihilated. He's been replaced by an Otto Octavius that has never been Superior Spider-Man, and has his original body now. And has his original body back. Sorry, tangent. There has been another development as far as another Marvel B or C list hero which has a new ability that can make him rather dangerous. You remember who the Moon Knight is?
Yes.
Mark Spector, the man with multiple personality syndrome, schizophrenia, mercenary, kind of like an Egyptian-inspired Batman, more or less.
And far more insane.
Oh, God. That's debatable at this point. Recently, he apparently got a piece of the moon stuck in him. And if you know anything about the Moon Knight, his powers, or I guess you could say his influences, all come from an Egyptian god called Khonshu, a god of the moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now Mark Spector's eyes glow white, and he is able to see the world as Khonshu does. He can see all these weird spectral and supernatural threats that may not be perceivable to most other people. He also now has the ability to walk through walls.
Oh.
Now, when I first read about this, I thought, okay, cool, the Moon Knight got an upgrade. That's not bad. It used to be his only ability was he would gain like super strength and durability depending on the phases of the moon. When it's full, he's at his best. When it's a new moon, his powers are, relatively normal. With these new abilities, it is kind of cool that he can walk through walls, except now you have a man who's always been a little bit off his rocker who can walk through walls and now sees all these supernatural threats that most of the world cannot perceive. He might seem like a raving lunatic soon.
And we've seen what can be done with people that can phase through objects or people.
Yeah. Yeah, which means he and the ghost can now have a foot race through buildings. This could be really problematic. As a matter of fact, there have been teases that the Avengers may have to deal with this newly empowered Moon Knight. I think they heard something about the Fist of Khonshu rising, and they're going to have to come up against it. Which has also been one of the nicknames of the Moon Knight over the decades. A villain from the Max series of Marvel Comics is coming over to the main Marvel universe. This may require a little bit of explanation. Marvel used to have the equivalent of an R-rated group of comics. They called it the Max line. They were non-canon comics that involved very graphic stories of alternative versions of their characters. One of the most famous Max lines has to be The Punisher. I mean, The Punisher is pretty much made for R-rated storytelling. In any other format, he doesn't generally work as well. So, in the Punisher's Max universe, there was a pretty infamous storyline where he went up against an enemy called the Barracuda. The Barracuda was a terror of the Max run. And think of him as a killer of killers. And I don't mean that in the way that he kills bad people. I mean the Barracuda killed everybody. He was very much into it for interesting challenges, more or less. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Barracuda is coming to Marvel's regular universe.
That seems kind of scary for everyone.
Yeah, there's going to be a 5-issue miniseries starting in April of 2020. They're just calling it The Punisher versus Barracuda. And the man who helped create him, Ed Brisson, is writing this comic. The art's being done by Declan Shalvey.
I hope they let him cut loose with this storytelling.
Would you like to hear the solicitation?
Shoot.
Quote, Barracuda, the terror of the legendary Punisher Max run, makes his Marvel Universe debut in this prestigious miniseries from creators Ed Brisson and Declan Shalvey. While Frank Castle closes the case on a mob hitman hiding out in the Deep South, a brutal jailbreak in Miami catches his eye. But one of the escaped prisoners is the man known only as Barracuda, the most sadistic and dangerous of killers in a gangland filled with extremely dangerous and sadistic killers. Lock the doors and prep the morgues. War is coming to Miami. Unquote.
Sounds like Punisher might have a challenge?
Certainly does. I mean, especially if he's got to hunt down the Barracuda in an area that may have a bunch of these escaped prisoners in it. There may be a gauntlet that needs to be gotten through before Castle encounters the, I guess you could say, the canon version of the Barracuda.
Streets are gonna run red.
And there's going to be a Falcon and Winter Soldier series. We talked about this before. It's going to be a new miniseries, or no, yeah, it's going to be a new miniseries that is using the characters of the upcoming Disney Plus series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Except this series doesn't have to do with which one is going to become Captain America. It's just two former Captain America sidekicks adventuring based on a just something that reunites them. Specifically an assassination attempt on Bucky Barnes. There is a new character that's coming out in this miniseries from Marvel Comics, though. They're calling it The Natural. It's another one of these twisted versions of Captain America, similar to the U.S. Agent. It's a character that, according to artist Federico Vicini, quote, he wants to be Captain America, his idol, his hero, but he does that from the wrong side of the barricade, unaware of his mistakes. Bucky and Sam will have to do their best to show him what it really means to be Captain America. For his costume, I tried to keep some details from Cap's old one, the boots, for example. But I also added something new, like the black logo on his chest and mask, to point out the dark traits of his behavior, unquote.
Is there a picture to go with this?
Yeah, you interested to see the design of the Natural here?
Sure.
It's interesting because the first time I saw it, I thought, is this what it would look like if Shaggy dressed up as Captain America?
Really?
It's somewhat unassuming. It doesn't look like someone who's dangerous. But if it's someone who's taken the lessons of Captain America and hasn't learned from the missteps of the character, this could actually be very dangerous.
Oh, wow, you're right.
He does look like he's a sub sandwich away from following people around their adventures in a van, right?
Oh, God, this suit's too big.
According to writer Derek Landry, quote, in combat, no matter how good you are, there will always be someone better than you. Someone who's stronger or quicker or who's trained that little bit more. Even someone who's luckier. That's where the Natural came from. That fear in a fighter's mind that maybe their next opponent will be the one to outclass them, unquote. I like the concept. Just that little hint that this guy may have that edge that pushes him past one or both of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'll need to see it in action, though. There's part of me that's hopeful that this will be awesome, then there's a small part that's just skeptical. Any opinions?
If he says zoinks, I am out.
I might be in at that point. Well, Darth Vader's going to have a problem.
Yeah?
Yeah, in Star Wars Darth Vader #3, it's going to be by Greg Pak and Rafael Ienso. It comes out this April. Darth Vader is going to have to confront a character he probably should never have to confront. Padme Amidala.
Explain.
Well, if you listen to the solicits, it sounds like he's going to deal with either a hallucination or possibly her forced spirit. Quote, in his quest to destroy everyone who hid the existence of his son, Luke Skywalker, from him, Darth Vader has formed an unlikely partnership with an eerie shadow from his previous life. Now, they return to Naboo, where a powerful new host of vengeful ghosts await them. Delve deeper into Vader's past than you thought possible, with a shocking tale of tragedy and revenge, unquote. This issue, I don't have the exact date, it just says it goes on sale in April. I don't know. As much as I would like to think there's something to be gained from even a hallucination of Padme confronting Darth Vader, there's that other part of me that just says, maybe this is too much. Well, I mean, we know the track the character takes through the film, so he's not going to learn much from this encounter.
If it's a hallucination, it means that there's some fragment of him that's still there, some fragment of Anakin still there. Otherwise, if it's a Force, which I do not believe, I'm not sure what to take from that.
I don't know. I mean, I heard that she was Force sensitive, similar to like Finn at the end of the latest trilogy, but I don't know. I think we've discussed that I'm one of those people who's interested in Star Wars very casually. I don't dig into the mythos.
Yeah, I don't dig into it either, but yeah, no, you're right. This story doesn't really sound that appealing.
Not to me, anyway. But there is another story in Marvel Comics Star Wars that I would like to read right now. Right now in Star Wars #2, they're getting ready to answer a big mystery from between trilogies. Towards the end of issue 2 of the regular Star Wars books, and of course this is between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, the events that got them there, right? At the end of the second issue, you see an image of Luke Skywalker's lightsaber handle falling through Cloud City.
Right.
Someone caught it.
Huh.
And the thing is, we don't see who they are. It's just a character that says that Luke Skywalker must follow their destiny. It's a hooded figure. It almost looks like a Jedi cloak, but who can tell? The thing that's kind of curious, though, is the hand that reached out and caught it. The forearm looks bare, but they do have one black glove on. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that is also the same hand that Luke Skywalker lost in the fight that caused him to drop that lightsaber. There is speculation online that this could be the new Disney canon version of an expanded universe character, the clone of Luke Skywalker, Luke with two U's. That feels a bit cheesy to me.
It does.
I get the feeling this is something else, but I just don't know what it is yet. It's a human figure, so it's not like Maz Kanata or anything. You know, the orange-headed lady with the spectacles from the latest trilogy.
Yeah.
So I don't know what really this is. But it would be nice to fill in that gap to find out how Maz got her hands on this lightsaber. It does feel like one of those details missing from the latest trilogy.
I'll be honest, I'm kind of worried if it might be a clone of Anakin.
That would be a way better story, and I don't understand why.
Because I'm just trying to figure out how the hell they get his genetic material to clone him when they can easily get Anakin.
I don't know. Like I said, I think too many fans of the prior expanded universe are pinning their hopes that something else has bled through, but the idea that it's just a clone of Luke Skywalker is too simple. It feels like something that could easily become a cliche. This needs to be something else, I think.
The other thing I could think of, it could be Mara Jade.
It could, but I don't think they do that. Mara Jade's history in the expanded universe was heavily dependent on Luke Skywalker, and to introduce her in such a way that would make her pretty much an extraneous character would be a disappointment. I'd be more excited for Mara Jade if they introduced her as like a new pilot or just a new bounty hunter or something. Would you like to see what it looks like when a notorious manga creator gets to start doing covers for Marvel Comics?
Yes.
You had to think a while on that question.
I wasn't sure what to think, but I have to see it.
Okay, well, there is a new series coming about a classic Marvel character known as the Werewolf by Night. The Werewolf by Night is exactly what it sounds like. It is a character that transforms into a werewolf in the nighttime hours of the day. And what makes this... this was going on sale April 1st from Marvel Comics. What you are staring at is a special variant version of the cover of Werewolf by Night #1. And as far as I remember, they'd never had tattoos before. That's probably an addition either by recent writers or the creator of this particular image. But it's a very visceral image, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
It almost looks like he just ended his transformation. The character's got this weird kind of curvature and hunch in his back. It is definitely screaming at the image of the moon in the background, the gnarled trees without leaves in shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to know who did this image?
Yes, please. I cannot read the signature.
Takashi Ozaki. Oh, no, sorry. Takashi Okazaki. Takashi Okazaki is the creator of Afro Samurai.
Oh! I can see that.
According to editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, C.B. Cebulski, quote, "I've wanted to bring Takashi into Marvel ever since we first met during production of Afro Samurai, and we're thrilled he's finally found some time in his schedule. The way he illustrates characters to kinetically leap out of his art reminds me of so many Marvel masters, and I knew he'd be perfect for covers here, as this Werewolf by Night image perfectly shows," unquote. I do like the image. I'm not sure I will buy the series because I'm still not sure I'm interested in a lycanthrope character. But it's a great image. If you got any critiques, I'm willing to listen. I was kind of surprised to learn who did this.
My only critique is the muzzle. It feels too small, but I am unsure. I've not seen the character in comics, so...
Well, I mean, the character is pretty much like a lot of characters in Marvel Comics. The details of the character change a lot depending on who's drawing, so...
Alright, yep, I get it.
Well, I can't speak for you, but I've been having fun reading the latest version of Excalibur in Marvel Comics, the Dawn of X version. The one with Betsy Braddock as Captain Britain, followed up by Gambit, Rogue, Apokalips, Richter, and Jubilee.
Yep.
And it turns out the first mission of Excalibur may be way more important than I ever really assumed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
According to a press release by Marvel, quote, in Excalibur number 9, this new team sets their sights on the Starlight Citadel, home to the enigmatic Saturnine. This pivotal location serves as the gateway to the infinite Omniverse, and both readers and Excalibur will quickly learn that their quest there will impact the entirety of mutant kind, unquote. That sounds terrifying. So Excalibur's new mission, whatever it is, will have big repercussions for all of mutant kind, and they're about to deal with one of the first Excalibur's classic villains. Saturnine is... Dimensional Warlord sounds a bit too wide of breadth. She is an alternative version of another character who used to be... she's an alternative dimensional version, I should say, of a character who used to be one of Brian Braddock's girlfriends. Matter of fact, she killed the version from the 616 and took her place for a while.
It feels kind of awkward.
Oh, it was. It was a little hard to discern, but the character never really died or went away. She's been befuddled a few times, and she's been stopped in her plans. But a lot of it had to do with trying to seduce Brian Braddock so that he would follow her. I wonder how this character is going to respond when she finds out that Brian's sister is now Captain Britain. It's not going to be a fun conversation, I'm positive.
No.
But it also sounds interesting that the Starlight Citadel, the place where she's based in her home dimension, is the gateway to the Omniverse.
Huh.
I mean, multiverse is pretty easy to grasp as far as a concept, a host of universes that are different from the ones before it, right?
Yeah.
But the Omniverse, that's a term that's a little hard to wrap my head around.
Which is why I'm already checked out.
Well, it doesn't check me out. I'm just curious what they mean by the Omniverse. Multiverse already sounds very all-encompassing, so Omniverse must be something different. Maybe the Omniverse is how they get to DC.
That was a worrying thought in my mind.
Well, in more X-Men related news, there is another image that was released of a variant cover to the first issue of Children of the Atom, the new comic book that's supposed to have characters who are inspired to become sidekicks of the original X-Men. And the more I see of these characters, the more I'm convinced that their powers come through artificial means. This particular variant was done by Todd Knock. He's an artist that both you and I have met at different conventions. Mm-hmm. And he's a good guy. He's been doing art for a long time, ever since the Newman for Extreme Comics and Image back in, 1992? 93? But as you can see here, it's not just the Children of the Atom. It's the Children of the Atom with their opposite numbers, the X-Men they're inspired by. The only one there that doesn't have an inspired sidekick is Storm in the image. But I took a good look at this alternative cover, and the more I stare at it, the more I'm convinced the Children of the Atom have artificial powers. I mean, the Cyclops one, it's not too hard in Marvel Comics anyway to get your hands on a visor that could replicate Cyclops' type of abilities.
Yeah.
But take a good look at the kid standing next to Nightcrawler at the bottom.
I'm looking at the tail.
Yeah, that tail is like chrome metal. And let alone his outfit is strangely padded. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I took another look at the one at the top, the one that's sharing space with Archangel.
Uh-huh.
His skin is in blue. That's a face visor. He has something to protect him from the wind. I do think all these kids, even if they may be mutants, that's entirely possible, but even if they are, their powers wouldn't replicate the X-Men's as cleanly.
You know, I'm kind of looking at this. I'm kind of looking at Gambit. He looks kind of weirded out.
Yeah, I spent a while looking at the girl's costume. It's the only one that's relatively form-fitting compared to the others. I did notice, though, that every time she seems to, or at least in the images, when she's kinetically charging something similar to him, she's doing it with the gloves that have these weird red fingers at the end. Like those are the contact points where kinetic energy is infused into something.
That makes a lot more sense than the cards actually doing it.
Well, it's never been the cards. Gambit's powers are always to charge something up. I think she's doing it similarly, but I think those red fingers in particular are where she does it from.
Yeah, no, I was saying about I'm not sure who came up with the theory, but she's having tech cards replicating the powers.
Well, I think I said that last time when we just learned about this series. So, there's still more to discover, but yeah, I feel confident in the theory at this point. Last up in Marvel Comics, it's another X-Men related story, and it has to do with the Hellions. Mr. Sinister's team of villains, plus Havoc and Psylocke. And there was an ad for the Hellions in March of 2020. That's when the series comes out, and it seems to detail not only the series' first villain, but the series' first major problem.
Yeah? What
yeah.
did you get?
Well, according to the solicit, quote, "She's back. The Goblin Queen returns to shake things up on Krakoa."
Who is the Goblin Queen?
Okay, this is where it gets complicated. The Goblin Queen is Madeline Pryor.
Oh.
She is the clone of Jean Grey that was made to have his baby that eventually became Cable. She was Cyclops' first wife, technically. And because she's a clone of Jean Grey, that means technically she could be on Krakoa and be practically undetectable. She is a mutant, after all.
Mm-hmm.
Except this is also somewhat personal because she was a clone that was created by Mr. Sinister.
Yeah.
And if she's back as the Goblin Queen, you gotta wonder if this means Inferno again. That's where the Goblin Queen was technically created. She was influenced by the demons of Limbo during the Inferno event. Not positive news on any level.
No.
I sense a question.
It's not a question, it's just a thought of what was the reason for this interaction? Is it because she started, or is it because Sinister wants to fix something or get rid of something, or is it just happenstance that they just came across each other?
I don't know, but if you remember when we were discussing Dawn of X, the Goblin Queen was hinted at during one of Mr. Sinister's Red Diamond gossip columns.
Yeah, I remember that.
As a matter of fact, I found the exact gossip column. It said, quote, "Years ago, a deceased red-headed pretender made a pact with the devil. When she passed on, most believed that any secret she had went to her grave. Won't everyone be surprised when they find out that not only is this not true, but she left behind a whole lot more than secrets," unquote. So, the question is, beyond the fact that she may or may not have more secrets than people are aware of, what else could she have left behind? Could she have had... Okay, so maybe she left some demons behind. Maybe there's a holdout from Inferno. Things like that have happened before with other Marvel events. Could she be one of a legion? Could there be more than one Madeline Pryor? Similar to the way there are more than one Stepher Cuckoos that were made out of, the contents of Emma Frost's body. And an even more worrisome idea that only just occurred to me. What if she had twins?
Oh, no.
What if there's another Summers out there? It's all viable questions because I don't have a good answer. Goodness knows everyone was surprised when she had the child in the first place. And I know she had the child when she and Scott Summers were still together. However, if you find the right retcon, it's always possible that she had another child somewhere. She also had an extended period where she was seeing Alex Summers, Havoc, before she went away. Maybe she got pregnant with him before Inferno happened. Oh God, Havoc's part of this team too.
Oh damn.
Wow, this all just got very complicated and soap opera-y.
Okay, Jerry Springer, let's go.
Well, when these people throw chairs, they mean it. Now we'll move on to DC Comic News. This is where we talk about the other major company in comics and what storylines and characters they have coming now and in the near future. There is a new potential villain coming to the Batman series. We know that Tom King has moved off of Batman as of issue number 85, but in the upcoming Batman number 92 by James Tynion IV, there was a tease of a new character between him and co-creator Jorge Jimenez. According to the teases by Tynion, it's a new character called Punchline, which immediately makes me think Joker and or Riddler. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I've seen images of this character.
Okay. The character, however, in the teases that Tynion put out, he was a little more nebulous about it. He said regarding the character's first appearance, quote, "But when does she appear for the first time? Is it in Batman number 89? Is it in Year of the Villain, Hell Arisen number 3? Am I writing her origin story in the Joker 80th Anniversary special? Is she the Joker's new girlfriend? Is she part of Joker War? Who the heck is this Punchline, and why does she want to stab everyone?" Unquote. Now, the idea of this character being a new Joker girlfriend, dear God, I hope not. I don't need Harley Quinn 2.0. You know what I mean? The character itself, she's kind of gothic. She has makeup that reminds me of an old Raggedy Ann and Andy doll. She's wearing a lot of purple and black, and she is carrying stiletto knives, like very long, thin knives. The X and O on the thighs of her thigh-high lace-up boots there is kind of interesting as well. I don't quite know what to make of this character. I have an idea, but it's kind of far out.
She looks very Southeast Asian inspired.
Maybe she's a bit retro. It occurred to me, though, that doesn't DC have a pair of villains called Punch and Judy?
I do not know. I'm not that familiar with DC.
I have to check, because with a name like Punchline and this kind of retro makeup, it reminds me a bit of them. I'm certain I saw Punch and Judy in the animated. I don't know if I've seen them in DC Comics. I don't know. I mean, what do you think based on this design? I'm kind of mixed as to whether or not something should be sought out about her.
I feel like I feel like she might have a relationship with Joker. I just don't. I think might be a bit more antagonistic.
For a second, I thought there might be a hint in the fact that this image had two of them, but I realized one of them is decorated with like a little bit of viscera and kind of a blood splatter. For a moment,
like this alternate poses or renditions.
Well, the pose is the same. It's just, like I said, the addition of the dripping blood. There was a moment there where I thought, with these two images and the name Punchline, maybe she's a self-replicator that uses knives. That'd almost be terrifying.
Scary.
Yeah. But, I don't know. I think it's just artistic license. I don't think that's an indication of ability. Meanwhile, though, there's been an additional 80-page special, or 80th anniversary special announced for this year. If you recall, we recently discussed that both Catwoman and the Joker are getting special 80th anniversary, like, gigantic 100-page issues.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's another character in Batman's universe that's also turning 80 this year, and his name is Dick Grayson.
Mm-hmm.
We're also going to get a Robin 80th anniversary 100-page super spectacular this year.
Yeah, which one?
What do you mean?
Which Robin?
I said Dick Grayson. This is coming out March 11th from DC Comics. It's going to be a 100-page spectacular. Cover price will be $9.99. For the 1940s variant, Jim Lee is doing that one. It's actually a more modernized take on the first cover that Robin appeared on, where he's jumping through a circus-style, like, paper hula hoop.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing a new version of that.
I think I've seen some of that.
It's kind of disturbing when Batman smiles. It's been so long since he's done that willingly, I keep thinking something's seriously wrong. I think I've gotten jaded as I've gotten older. In Batman Superman, the latest series that involves the two biggest heroes in all of DC Comics, they've expanded on their recent storyline, and I'm sorry to say I almost feel like it waters it down a bit for me. Do you remember what the storyline is in the first volume of Batman Superman?
No.
The Sinister Six? The Batman Who Laughs has infected 6 major DC heroes with
right, yeah.
a special venom that brings out their worst character traits and turns them into de facto villains. The first set involved Donna Troy, Commissioner Gordon, Supergirl, and the Beetle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their lineup, well, the other two were Shazam and Hawkman. That lineup is terrifying in a number of different ways. Not just because it's very personal to DC's heroes, but those are 6 people that, when you combine them, can pretty much take on the majority of the superheroes in the DC universe. Especially when you combine them with the 7th character, the Batman Who Laughs himself. The problem I have is that in the recent special, I think it's Year of the Villain Hell Risen, this whole thing has been expanded. The Batman Who Laughs has finally taken the Sinister Six and attacked Lex Luthor. And Luthor is still powered up as a result of the Legion of Doom event, or the Doom War event.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where his powers come from?
Source Wall?
He's absorbed Martian DNA.
Okay.
It makes him a shapeshifter and telepath now. It used to be the Martian. It used to be the Martian Manhunter. Now it's another Martian character he's absorbed. It's somewhat complicated. Don't want to get into it. Okay.
All right.
So, the Batman Who Laughs launches his attack on this Apex Predator version of Luthor that a lot of people call Apex Lex for short. And after a prolonged fight, Luthor has defeated the Sinister Six, which is a high-level feat.
Mm-hmm.
But now, the Batman Who Laughs has activated additional characters that are also carrying this modified venom in them. It includes Miss Martian, Hawk and Dove, Beast Boy, Booster Gold, the second Dr. Light, and Steel. Technically, the second Steel, the daughter of the original.
Uh-huh.
Now, the idea that he can activate more of them is somewhat scary, except it kind of takes the luster off the first 6. I'm trying to find the right way to put it. It doesn't make the first 6 seem as special if he's got a horde of other characters all infected with his venom that he can activate on a moment's notice.
Seems very Batman-like, though, to have a backup plan for your...
I grant you it does, except this is not entirely Batman. I mean, this is a character from an alternative universe. This feels a bit like...
Still Batman. As much as we hate to say that.
It makes the storyline feel like a bit much. It also makes it kind of odd that the Batman Who Laughs allowed himself to be beaten by Batman and Superman, who went through the original Sinister Six, only to have this secondary horde activated when he goes up against Lex Luthor instead. You see the gap? I mean, not only did Batman and Superman defeat the the Sinister Six, all of them got away except for Commissioner Gordon. They managed to capture him. If he had this wild card, why didn't he pull it out when he actually had Superman and Batman on the ropes? I'm not saying it's a bad storyline, but I think editorial kind of let us down on this one. If you want to talk different, though, we need to talk for a minute about the Curse of the White Knight storyline, the Black Label series by DC.
Uh-huh.
Well, they certainly changed their universe. This is a universe where the characters, at least in the section of, or at least in the DC Gotham section of the universe, has been taken down a very different trail. Jack Napier, the Joker on medication, attempted to save the city, but he's now back in Arkham Asylum when the medication wore off. Batman is now known to Commissioner Gordon, who recently died, and now Azrael is the Joker's latest weapon to try and undo Batman. The difference here is the Joker was recently killed. And when I say killed, I mean his brains were blown out. You want to ask. I know you want to ask.
Did the comic actually come to a pass where, where we saw it in the first issue? Or what, the beginning of the first issue? I'm trying to remember.
I'm trying to understand what you're asking here.
There was a moment that they showed in one, I think in the first issue, where you saw Jack Napier stepping into a cell with a bat chained up.
Oh, no, that was the original White Knight. That was Batman White Knight. We're talking about the sequel miniseries, Curse of the White Knight. And this has nothing to do with that, because the person who pointed the gun and pulled the trigger was Harleen Quinzel. The Joker had... Sorry?
I can understand the logic behind that, actually.
Actually, it's a little more nuanced than you think, because the Joker was repeatedly threatening Quinzel and Napier's children. He had kidnapped their twins.
Ooh.
And during one of the few moments of clarity of where the Napier personality managed to resurface, he had not only begged Quinzel to stop the Joker from harming their kids, but he also told her that she was what the Joker was most afraid of, because the love that Napier feels for Quinzel is what allows him to push past the Joker persona and occasionally take control.
Sounds cheesy, but okay.
But yeah, so instead of allowing him to continue to be a threat, Quinzel took the extra step. The Joker was trying to confront an injured Batman, and Quinzel jumped between them with the Joker's own long-barrel revolver and didn't really hesitate. While he was mid-quip, she pulled the trigger.
I kind of like that.
So there's still 2 issues left in this miniseries, and I'm sitting here going, wait, there's more? But it is also a very different universe, because Azrael is convinced that he is the proper Batman. He did the very 90s thing, built himself a brand new exosuit that's very Batman-esque, and he went through Arkham Asylum with a flaming sword, and he killed characters like Poison Ivy and Two-Face and the Penguin and Killer Croc and, most of Batman's major enemies. It'll be interesting to find out what the frick is left in the city after this. Oh, and we found out that Bruce Wayne isn't actually a member of the Wayne family, but spoilers. I know, it's a lot to process.
I really do not care.
Okay. Well, we finally found out who the Batwoman Beyond is in DC Comics. We've known for a while that someone stole an extra Batwoman uniform from the future version of Bruce Wayne, the one who's too old to be Batman anymore. And Terry McGinnis has been offline. He had a very bad encounter with one of his signature villains, Blight. But someone has been running around... Sorry?
Yep, I know who that character is.
Okay. Well, Batwoman Beyond... It was a big mystery as to who she was, and several accusations were thrown around, including it being Barbara Gordon. It turns out none of that was correct. It was a character I was actually unaware of in the Batman Beyond section of DC's canon. The Batwoman Beyond is Elena Grayson. It's Nightwing's...
That's a new character.
Yeah, it's Nightwing's daughter.
Yeah.
I really don't know much about the character. I know that Grayson himself is the mayor of Bloodhaven. It seems like he can never get away from that section of Gotham, for crying out loud. Elena was his right-hand attendant for as long as I've known, anyway. Since she survived a bad encounter with the Joker in issue number 25. But evidently, no one is aware that she is the one who stole the Batwoman uniform.
I'm more curious who the mother is.
I don't know myself. She's not exhibiting any alien traits, so I think it's safe to say it's not Starfire.
True. All right.
So I really don't know who the mother could be. I mean, Grayson's presence in DC Comics has been in so much flux, it could actually be a number of people outside the usual suspects at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't know. I imagine now that they've revealed that Elena Grayson is Batwoman Beyond, we'll get some more information as to her history. Now, we have to talk about something I don't like to talk about in DC Comics.
Superman?
Worse. Sorry, that was unfair. But it's something I like even less than Superman. There's been a new teaser released. And at the bottom of it, it says, quote, "And then, get ready for the encore. Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, the mayhem is imminent," unquote.
Dark Knight's Metal 2?
I don't know about Dark Knights, but it definitely sounds like a sequel to the Metal event. And I say that because on this teaser is a version of Wonder Woman, and I say version because I've never seen her look like this before, with a lot more gold accents and apparently the severed head of the Batman Who Laughs hanging from her belt. But in her hands is a very metal, and I mean DC's metal, type of weapon. It's a chainsaw. It's a chainsaw that appears to have as the pull string, or possibly the blade, the lasso of truth. This has metal, like, stamped all over it.
I feel like we've gone back to the 90s here.
That's a fair way to put it. I'm even more let down when Scott Snyder put a tweet out after this announcement saying what the name of this curious new weapon is. According to the tweet, it's simply called the Chainsaw of Truth. That's a bit of a letdown.
Again, very 90s.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a basic name for such an unusual item, and the item itself is somewhat scary. I mean, that lasso has a multitude of potential abilities depending on the writer, as well as it being a divine weapon. Just calling it the Chainsaw of Truth seems so basic. I would be more terrified if this Wonder Woman called that thing the lie detector. Because when I use it, the truth comes out.
See, that would be more acceptable and still just as 90s.
Probably, yeah. Still, though, I actually have trouble finding a lot of DC fans who tell me that they are positive on the metal event. It seems like a lot of them read it, but I can't find a lot that will talk to me about finding it positive, so I don't know why they've managed to go back into this well. Do you know anyone who talks fondly about metal?
I've listened to a few YouTubers that speak highly of it, but
I mean, like personal interaction. It's easy to find people that speak about a number of different things on YouTube.
Yeah. Can't say that I have, but I don't really delve in comic book circles other than this one.
Yeah, I try to chat with people just to find out what they found interesting, reasons why. Sometimes those conversations enlighten me. Maybe I've missed something in a particular story. But as much as I found people who do and don't like Tom King's Batman, I found people who do and don't like Darkest Night. I found people who swear by Superman. I can't find anyone who will look at me and say, yeah, Dark Knight's Metal was great. They usually give me that expression that just says, yeah, I read it.
Think they're doing it because of a financial success?
I don't know. I really don't know. Last up in DC comic news, though, the reveal of Superman's secret identity to the world is about to have repercussions, but I don't quite know if it's the right type. It was revealed that in the upcoming Action Comics 1019 by Brian Michael Bendis and John Romita Jr., that Apex Lex Luthor, Leviathan, and the Red Cloud are teaming up to take on Superman, and they're going to make Superman pay by attacking Metropolis. Evidently, the plan is not just the three of them, but like several associated villains, including the Legion of Doom, are going to attack Metropolis to make Superman pay, now that they know that he and Clark Kent are one and the same.
How was that any different from usual?
That was my question. I mean, maybe they can concentrate their attacks a little more in Metropolis, but I guess I'm kind of confused because I always got the feeling that just because it's been widely identified that that is Superman City, that's why most people tend to avoid Metropolis for mayhem. Just because you know that Clark Kent loves the city, I don't know that that changes the fact that this is where Superman is.
Honestly, if they really want to go after him, attack Smallville.
You know what? I like the way you think. That makes a lot more sense to me. That would scare him and be easier to destroy and harder to defend.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, you won't need as many people.
Yeah.
Apex, any one of those people by themselves could do it.
Yeah. That's much better tactical thinking. You want to send a letter?
I think you're a little late to that wagon.
Okay. Just telling you how brilliant you are.
The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Last up is our general comic and convention news. This is where we talk about comic books that are not Marvel or DC related, as well as conventions happening all around the world. As far as WonderCon, happening this April 10th through 12th in Anaheim, California, the fifth and potentially final wave of special guests have been announced. Unlike San Diego Comic-Con, these people are not getting spotlight panels, but they will be engaged over the weekend and are very likely to be available for signatures and or other events. We have the cartoonist from Mad Magazine and Gru the Wanderer. Sergio Aragones is going to be there. The writer and or editor of The Garfield Show, Kirby, King of Comics, Gru the Wanderer, Pogo, the complete syndicated comic strips, Mark Evanier. The artist on numerous covers of the comic book Die, Stephanie Hans, will be at WonderCon. The artist on Justice League Origins, Suicide Squad, and DC Comics publisher and chief creative officer, Jim Lee, will be there. The author of the Honor Harrington series, David Mark Weber. And finally, and this is one I'm personally interested in, the artist and co-creator of Naomi and the artist on Green Lantern Far Sector, Jamal Campbell, will be there. I cannot speak for you, but based on the guest list for WonderCon, there may be like 2 or 3 pieces of art I would like to get before the weekend is out.
I'll be disappointed if you don't come back with a sketch of Naomi in your book.
I don't know if I want Naomi from him. If Jamal Campbell would agree to do something for me, and that's an if, I would really like to get his version of Jo, the Green Lantern from Far Sector. Love the design he put together for her. I know we've discussed this at one point or another. I mean, don't get me wrong, Naomi is an amazing creation. Really is. But there's something about Jo that is just very unique among all the Green Lanterns. She's far from the cookie cutter we usually get as far as Earth Green Lanterns.
Wait, there's another one?
You didn't know about Jo?
No.
Jo is short for Sojourner. She is an African-American Green Lantern. I think she's from Chicago. She is stuck out in a very far section of green space, hence the Far Sector name. She's out there by herself.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of just kind of police action, she's involved in the political actions in this particular sector that involves a number of different aliens. And she's struggling to keep neutral. She's trying not to take one side or another, and instead of just smashing things like a cop, she's trying to negotiate a better life for these different races. And I think in the second or third issue of this miniseries, things are just breaking down past the point where that's possible.
I think you have discussed this before.
Pretty sure.
I'm just like, great, there's another Earth Green Lantern.
I know it sounds very basic, but I'm a huge fan of her overall design and look, not just because she's African American, but because there's little aspects of a number of different Green Lanterns in her costume. I mean, she doesn't wear a domino mask like the others do. She uses her powers to make these green sunglass type things. She has a glove and jacket combination that is reminiscent of Guy Gardner without completely copying it. And then she has this interesting kind of asymmetrical belt sitting on her hips. I sent you an image of the first issue of Far Sector, which has her on the cover. And even her hair isn't just as cleanly cut and coiffed as like other Green Lanterns. It has this bump to it and this almost natural feel. I do like her design.
It definitely stands out. I want to say that the green shades are a bit much, but damn.
Yeah, it's a good overall design. It's a very original feeling character, and like I said, she's more of a troubleshooter than just another cop, like most of the Green Lanterns act. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to get that in my book. Again, if I have no choice and it's like I can only do Naomi, fine, do Naomi. I'm totally cool with that. But I would really like to get something by Jamal Campbell in my book. But now that I know the cover art...
I was saying I'd really like to see someone try to cosplay this.
It would be interesting. It may come out of San Diego, you never know.
Yeah.
But now also that I know the cover artist on Die is going to be there, I gotta figure out if I can find that person. Stephanie Hans. That would be something really unique to have. IDW Comics reported massive losses in 2019 overall.
Really?
Yeah. There was a story that was published that their operational loss for 2019 was $26.4 million.
Oof.
Yeah. However, that may have to do with a number of different factors. Remember, we spoke in the last year that IDW, instead of selling their intellectual rights to media companies to make series out of their intellectual properties, they pumped money and got loans to pretty much create their own their own entertainment company to make these series.
Uh-huh.
And they haven't started to see the revenues from it. I mean, we found out that Lock and Key is pretty much complete. The first trailers for that were released, I think, a few weeks ago, as well as various other series that they have that are upcoming. The only intellectual property they have that has an ongoing series at the moment would be Winona Earp on the Sci-Fi Channel. So it could be that we're about to see the turnaround and they're going to see the monies come in from these series fairly soon. However, I am kind of concerned that if that doesn't happen very soon, $30 million is a huge loss for a comic book company.
Especially one that is in their demographic.
An independent, yes. You know, I hope they turn it around. IDW puts out some very entertaining comics over the course of the months. Not as often as I read Marvel, but still, there's some quality stuff in there. I would like to see them pull through. Also, I don't know which one, but according to solicits, a fan-favorite character is going to return in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers number 50 by Boom Studios.
I'm not familiar enough with their run of the series to make a guess.
Neither am I. According to the information on CBR.com, it's the final chapter of the Necessary Evil storyline, and the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the Omega Rangers will team up to take down something called the Anointed One. But in the issue's final pages, there will be a shocking return. And it doesn't say whom that is. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 50 will be written by Ryan Perrault with art by Danielle Di Nicuolo. The issue is scheduled to come out in April of 2020. I'm at a loss. I don't know who that could be. I watched the original series, but I'm not enough of a fan of anything to be able to tell you what all this means. Hopefully it's not that kid from the Turbo series with the inflatable suit. Now, in news I never expected to hear, but I guess we could technically blame Amazon Prime for this. Dynamite Comics' Boys comic book is getting a sequel.
Huh.
Not only that, the original creator of The Boys, Garth Ennis, is coming back to do the story for it. It's called The Boys, Dear Becky. I don't know why Dear Becky sounds like a terrifying subtitle for this series. But according to Ennis, quote, "Originally, I never intended to do more with The Boys at all, for obvious reasons. I found myself thinking about the story and characters again over the past couple years. There was one aspect of the original story, and one character in particular, that I never felt got a fair shake. Becky Butcher, whose demise motivates her husband Billy to do the terrible things he does, but who only actually appears in 2 issues of the original book. I liked writing Becky very much, almost as much as Butcher himself, and I wanted to look in greater detail as to how her relatively brief appearance cast such a big shadow," unquote. I don't know.
Sounds like a prequel?
Yes, it is. It sounds like he's doing the storyline as to Becky Butcher's life. And at the very least, the events that led to her demise that caused Billy Butcher to turn to the sociopathic anti-hero he became. I'm curious in the story. I don't know how well I will read it. I remember that we reread the first volume of The Boys, and my taste in storytelling have just moved beyond that series at this point. It was very entertaining to me when it came out, but at this point it feels like overkill. Oh my god, I'm getting old. Last up in general comic news, there is a new series of the Hardy Boys that sounds downright morbid. This is being put out by Dynamite Entertainment. It's being done by Anthony Cole and Joe Eisma. And the official press release indicates that the Hardy Boys are going to have to solve a mystery that may have more implications than you think. This is an ongoing series for the Hardy Boys, and the very first mystery they have to figure out is who killed Nancy Drew. Not familiar, huh?
No.
Okay,
I've
so
only heard this title in passing.
Okay, so the Hardy Boys, they had a series of novels that were written back in the day, usually in the 60s and maybe a few in the 70s, about 2 relatively young teenage brothers who were solving crimes together, or not crimes, mysteries, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was very much in that kind of vein of that era where a lot of kids followed the storylines of somewhat older characters solving mysteries. Nancy Drew was kind of their counterpart in the day. Nancy Drew was a young woman who in herself was solving mysteries. So in this case, you have a pair of literary figures trying to solve the murder of another literary figure. Maybe this will only appeal to certain demographics, but when I read the title of this, I admit I was very curious to read about the Hardy Boys having to solve Nancy Drew's murder.
Sounds like it's definitely going to start mixing their lore together to make a story.
Oh,
that's always
Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys did have several crossover books, novel books back in the day. So the characters do technically know each other. I think this is one of those things where it's in the same vein as, like, say, Riverdale or The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. These are classic characters who are getting a new light for an older audience. You know, an audience that can now afford to buy these things on their own instead of asking their parents to pick it up for them.
Yeah, the revival of those two shows didn't do it for me, but, you know, there are people that like it.
When you say shows, I assume you mean Riverdale and Sabrina, not
the
Hardy Boys? Okay.
I tried watching both of them.
Okay, I was about to say, the only show I'm aware that the Hardy Boys showed up on was WWE Raw, and those were a different pair of Hardy Boys. You know, they solved a lot of issues, but usually involved chairs.
And high flying.
Yeah. The subject of this week was originally supposed to be Once and Future by Boom Studios, but we really need Joanna here to help break it all down, because Jesse and I are not terribly familiar with Arthurian legends, and we could use a little context. So, to stopgap, we're going to have a discussion and a bit of a retrospective in regards to Transformers comics. Transformers was the toy line that was officially created in the United States in 1984, or released in 1984, excuse me. The comics and the Transformers concept was originally created by an American comic book writer working for Marvel. That story still blows my frickin' mind.
Mm-hmm.
And he is the one who came up with the backstories of the original Transformers as well as Cybertron out of a series of Japanese shape-changing toys. Actually, multiple series of Japanese shape-changing toys. It was not any one thing. The first Transformers comics actually started to come out in, I want to say, 1984 from Marvel. Marvel originally held the license to this series from 1984 to 1991. The original series ran for 80 issues and had a few spin-off series. Jesse, did you ever read any of the original Marvel run growing up?
Not the original. I picked up some of the G2 run, but that was very 90s.
You know, the Transformers comics from the, like, approximately 1984 was actually when I started reading comics as a kid. Granted, it did exactly what it was designed to. It was a tie-in to a toy line that was made to make me want to buy toys and watch the cartoons, which I did. You know, it was... I watched the cartoons, but I mostly watched reruns because at the time they released initially, I was like 3. There was actually a couple of comic book miniseries for Transformers by Marvel Comics. There was, of course, the Headmaster series that released in 1986 that introduced the Headmasters to the comic readers. There was a couple of Marvel Comics crossovers, including a miniseries where in issue 3, Spider-Man showed up.
Huh.
And this was the era when Spider-Man was wearing a black and white costume. Thankfully, the crossover didn't really affect Marvel canon too much. I can only imagine how the world would change if three-story tall giant robots started to walk around every city in Marvel. There were certain characters that never really appeared in the original run of Marvel Comics. Ultra Magnus, Springer, RC, and Metroplex never appeared in Marvel's original run.
Well, those characters only appeared after the movie, or in the movie.
Yes, but Marvel Comics held the license well after the movie, and even well after the original comics or cartoon series ended in 1987.
Yeah, my understanding is the show kind of appeared out in the Americas, but they picked up in Japan and in the UK quite well.
Yeah, but that was a completely different thing, and they had their own original characters that didn't appear for a very long time. The comic storyline never really followed the cartoons at all. They took their own different way, including a storyline that when I was a child freaked me out, where Ratchet and Megatron ended up going through an explosion while going through a portal, and the two of them were temporarily fused together.
I've seen that panel.
Yeah, and it wasn't fused together in like, half of it's Ratchet and half of it's Megatron. No, it was much more of like Jeff Goldblum's The Fly. It was more like that. It was two things jammed together, sharing space, moaning in pain. It was... When you're 8, that is horrific. I mean, even as an adult, I look at those panels and think, dear God.
They got away with a lot of things in those early comics, and they kind of still get away with it now.
Well, I mean, now at this age, it's easier for me to process. I think more... Obviously, I think more complicated than I did when I was 8. If I didn't, either I was a very intelligent 8-year-old or I'm not a very smart adult. But, I mean, the Transformers comics were where I first had to process death. The movie was so weird, the animated 1986 film, that characters died, but I didn't really think about it. When you're sitting there able to pore over the pages of a comic and watch characters be melted alive, you have to put weird thoughts into it. Made me question mortality a lot more than I was comfortable with as a child.
I saw the imagery in some of them, in some of the comics I got, again in the G2. They were kind of brutal, but it never really bothered me.
Okay.
I was able to concept that these aren't real.
All right. The original run of the comics, though, the first 12 issues, I believe, were reprints of the UK run of Transformers, and then after that, American creators kind of picked it up and started to create their own line of comic books in the US. You'll notice a huge art shift between the two, too. The first 12 issues, they had a very painted style. And this is way before the era of computers, so this would have had to have been hand-done. It was very scratchy. The Marvel line, it was... I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it. It was very square, like the original cartoon characters were. But it was also... It was much more stiff than that. Motion was not very well portrayed in these comics. I remember a lot of key issues of Transformers comics that aren't worth very much today, as far as I know. I remember the introduction of the Dinobots. I remember when Optimus Prime died and Grimlock named himself King of Autobots. Not leader, King. I also remember when Starscream got his hands on some kind of weird cosmic upgrade that caused him to go all Akira and grow and get uglier. I think it was called the Underbase. But the Underbase saga was kind of the comic book version of Transformers the movie. They killed off a lot of older characters and started to introduce modern concepts of a lot of them. Like Bumblebee turning to Goldbug and Action Masters and things like that. I guess the best way to put it would be that Marvel did do their best to put their own spin on the Transformers characters, but in the end, they didn't really create much of note as far as overall comic book history. It was just kind of there. It sold fine, but it didn't create any sort of lasting impression on anyone. The only thing I can tell you for sure that always kind of sticks out in my mind is that I think the Transformers comics are where Jim Lee got started in Marvel Comics.
Really?
Yeah, there's an issue I always go back to that had to do with the Pretender Cloudburst. He got involved in some kind of... He got involved with some kind of organic being, like women as tall as they were, but because he was in his Pretender shell, the woman thought he was an organic. Then he revealed himself, and she freaked out and cut off his head. The image of the cover is a woman with Cloudburst's head holding it up by wires, and I didn't notice until I was much older that the signature at the bottom is Jim Lee's.
Huh.
It doesn't look much like the style you're used to in Lee. It looks like it's very early in his career. So I'd have to backtrack, but I'm pretty sure that's like the first Marvel comic he did. After 1991, like the Transformers toys and cartoon, everything just kind of stopped for a while. There wasn't really a sign of Transformers for quite a while. And there was the Generation 2 comics that ran for 12 issues a full year in 1993, but it failed to make a serious impact on comic book sales or readers in any real way.
Was that the Dreamwave run?
No, this was... I I think it was another set of Marvel comics. Yeah, it was a Marvel UK run. They just subtitled it Generation 2. They pretty much reprinted some of the UK run, and it just fizzled. It just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But in 2002 was when Transformers entered a bit of a resurgence, and it was a combination of different factors. The Transformers movie by Michael Bay had been announced, and it was before anyone had a chance to look at it, so excitement was building. And then a relatively new comic book company called Dreamwave put out a set of Transformers comics from 2002 to 2004. And I can't speak for you, but I collected a lot of that run. I thought those were very quality comics.
I tried to collect some of that too.
Yeah, Dreamwave. They used a lot of comic book artists that I was aware of. I wasn't really following writers at that point. But the way the comics were presented, the characters looked and acted a lot like you would expect in a cartoon, just maybe a bit more mature than that. Mm-hmm. And visually, these things were a treat. They were amazing to look at and read. The only unfortunate point is that Dreamwave spent so much to get the license that the company went out of business. Dreamwave pretty much started and ended with their run of Transformers comics over 2 years. And while they were selling really well for an independent book, they weren't selling enough to make up the cost that they gave, or the money they gave to Hasbro for the license to create the comics. And as a result, a lot of their storylines were just dropped, never resolved in any meaningful way. Some of their storyline ideas did end up getting a second life later on, but that's a little bit further in the conversation. Jesse, did you ever check out the Dreamwave War Within miniseries? I
think I got parts of that somewhere in my room.
Okay, I'm a huge fan of that for a couple reasons. Let me preface this by saying I'm a huge Dinobots fan. I have no great reason for this other than I was a kid and robot dinosaurs blew my frickin' mind.
Yeah, I understand the feeling.
Yeah, and I always found both Grimlock and Snarl entertaining for different reasons. Snarl, he just had an anger issue that I couldn't quite put my finger on, and Grimlock, I don't know. There was something about his weird speech patterns and his just blustery anger that I found entertaining over the years. Mm-hmm. I'm sure part of that had to do with Greg Berger's unusual voice that he put on this character. But the War Within, for the first time, told a full origin story for the Dinobots. You know, pre-Dinobot form, pre-Earth, they actually had a story that began on Cybertron for once, and they were war machines, more or less. It's hard to describe what their vehicle modes were because we didn't see them very often in the War Within.
They're most of them, aside from Swoop, or I think Dive Bomb at the time, was pretty much tanks.
Yeah, it was Swoop. Swoop was a small jet of some sort, or glider. But
yeah.
They were all war wagons. I mean, Slag had like this six-wheeled form that I saw once or twice. Sludge was this huge lumbering thing. He looked like a rolling bunker. And Grimlock, I know, was like, as far as size, in between Sludge and Slag. But he looked like a tank with a kind of a bumped-up turret.
He looked more like a tank chariot to me.
Yeah. I really liked this version of things because I think that was the first story that had Grimlock and the Dinobots as former Decepticons who just decided to work for the Autobots, not because they liked them necessarily, but because Grimlock tried to take over from Megatron and it didn't go well, and he just swore he was going to destroy him. And instead of just swearing to the sky like Starscream did, he went and found people that were willing to help him destroy Megatron.
I didn't get that far into that series.
I read the miniseries. The miniseries was just, to me, it was unbelievably awesome. It wasn't until later that the origin for the Dinobots changed a lot. And I mean a lot. But if I can back up for a sec, I need to ask, did you ever read the Marvel miniseries of the Headmasters?
No.
I read that entire run, and it is somehow both incredibly good and awful at the same time.
80s product to sell toys? Yeah, it sounds about right.
Very much, but I mean, the concept never really... whether it be the cartoon or the comic book, the concept of why gigantic robots would give up their heads for organic beings to inhabit and transform into. I guess you could say that they tried to put a positive spin on it, but nobody could figure out how to make it really work. The reasons were always very bizarre.
To be honest, I've never been a big fan of the headmaster gimmick. I thought vehicles turning into robots and vice versa was enough gimmick.
I'm fine with the headmaster concept, but the story was always very lacking. I mean, even as a kid, I would just read it and go, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's always hard to explain how somebody could just kind of put on a power suit and suddenly fold themselves into a head. That seems painful to me.
Cartoon logic.
Yeah, pretty much. But after Dreamwave collapsed, Transformers comics pretty much went nowhere for a short amount of time. And I mean it was really short. There were a few miniseries that came out, but nothing terribly serious. Then IDW Publishing came along and picked up the license in 2005. And they decided to start producing comics in a relatively unusual way as far as this line. Instead of coming out with a full series, they came out with a short miniseries that began the story of the Transformers on Earth. And then they started to produce one-shot comics that continued the story from the aspect of individual Transformers characters.
You
never read these?
Went with... No, I never really knew how it started with IDW.
Well, it was both a boon and a problem, because the boon was it created a serious demand. These comics were of a decent enough quality that people wanted more, except we were only getting like these occasional one-shots, sometimes with 2 months in between these individual stories. The problem was that there was a few one-shots, then maybe another miniseries, and a few one-shots, and another miniseries. And this is all before IDW put out any sort of regular Transformers comics. The issue became the timeline was muddled. We weren't sure where the one-shots sat with these miniseries. It got to the point where IDW actually had to post online a definitive timeline as to which order to read these things in to understand the story. And they had to do it about the time they started to actually put out a regular Transformers series. And that wasn't until January of 2006. So you see the problem. But the IDW kind of reimagined the whole thing. They started out with using these series as a basis and as an origin. But the original series rolled along with such ferocity, they eventually came out with a secondary series that was originally titled Transformers Lost Light. And Lost Light is easily my favorite Transformers comic ever. Lost Light involved a lot of second-generation characters like Ultra Magnus, Cyclonus, Hot Rod, as well as a host of original character or Generation 1 characters like Trailbreaker and First Aid. And then somehow they also made interesting original characters that were thrown into the mix. I don't know. Lost Light is always hard for me to summarize. They have a definitive mission. They're looking for a lost tribe of Cybertronians called the Knights of Cybertron. Like old-fashioned Cybertronian colonists. But the story takes so many weird twists and turns and enemies that it's hard to just sit down and tell somebody the point A to B approach of Lost Light. That eventually became more than meets the eye. It's this almost Shakespearean set of betrayals and lift-ups and crusades and death and sadness and triumph. It really hits on all these weird points that you wouldn't expect a story of giant robots to hit.
Well, without any real comparison, they're not giant robots. They're just an alien race looking for something.
I know, I still think in relation. Lost Light is also the first series that I can think of that had nothing to do with Earth, and I think it made the series better. For the first time, it was like the Cybertronian characters actually having to tell their own story without any sort of human perspective. So it really felt like this freestanding thing where the characters could grow and breathe in their own way. However, the Lost Light series also birthed my favorite Decepticons of all time, as well as the most terrifying ones. The Decepticon Justice Division.
Oh, those guys are terrifying.
Yes. 6 Decepticons whose entire job is to get an ongoing list of Decepticons from Megatron, supposedly, who need punishment. And punishment usually meant death. But they, of course, this being punishment, they had to torture them into such death.
Yeah, their alt modes are interesting.
A shredder, an incinerator. Well, incinerator is too strong of a word. A melter, anyway. An electric chair, a sniper rifle, a tank.
That seems the most mundane of them all.
It is, and that's because the character of Tarn was like aping Megatron in every conceivable way, even had his own custom fusion cannon built. Everything about him was, "I love you, Megatron!" You know,
So I can't imagine his thoughts when he sees Megatron and he has an Autobot symbol placed on his chest plate.
oh, that was a big part of the story, and man, it turned into it wasn't just a physical war and battle. That was like a cultural battle. It's like their philosophies were fighting at the same time as their fists. It's one of those things that, as a complicated thinker, it worked for me on so many levels. It was just amazing.
Sounds like some good storytelling.
I think it's brilliant. I think if you're a fan of Transformers as a story, Lost Light / More Than Meets the Eye is the pinnacle of storytelling for these characters. It avoids getting trapped on a lot of characters that fanboys tend to revolve around, like Soundwave, Optimus Prime, Jazz. It takes a bunch of relatively second-tier characters and really starts to augment their personalities. That are no longer just the hothead, the soldier, the paragon, the bookworm. They eventually become more than just the base character stereotypes you come to expect in Transformers books. As well as it works hard to give these characters a full culture instead of just making them storytelling devices. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I would say as far as ongoing, I don't think you'll find better, and Jesse, if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend it. I really do. It has a lot of twists and turns. You may not like what happens to all the characters in it, but it really works hard to make them fully fleshed out characters. My favorite miniseries, though, is another IDW one, and it's probably Rise of the Wreckers.
Rise?
Was it Rise or... No, Last Stand of the Wreckers. Sorry. Last Stand of the Wreckers. It wasn't the final Wreckers story. The final one is a little bit muddy, in my opinion. But the Wreckers story about a group of Autobots trying to find out what happened to their version of a special ops team known as the Wreckers that was led by Springer at the time is just... It's kind of like a Transformers version of the Dirty Dozen. You got a bunch of characters out on a suicide mission to find other suicide soldiers.
And they're told one tale of events when
it
was just more romanticized than anything else.
I don't think it's just romanticized. I think it's a case where the legend of the Wreckers was almost more important than the characters themselves.
Yeah, because all the characters are not nice.
Other than Springer, they're pretty much socio or psychopathic. They're downright crazy and possibly uncontrollable. So, yeah, it's an interesting philosophy question, which is, again, really strange to say in the middle of a Transformers comic. But it asks a lot of interesting questions as to what we believe as societies from what we hear versus what we know. Or even what the characters in your legends may have actually experienced. So... yeah, I don't know, Jesse. Do you have any favorite Transformers series over the years?
I really haven't explored too many of them. I've done a little bit here and there, but I've never fully completed a story.
Well, I would say you should read Lost Light, but it would take a while, because I believe if you go through Lost Light and the series it turned into, More Than Meets the Eye, which has its own number one and... not starting point, but continuation point, I think you're looking at like roughly 80 to 90 comic books.
It's a lot of books.
It is.
It's a lot of paper.
Yeah, you can find collected versions out there, but the series sold pretty well. The only reason the series really ended was because IDW eventually, I think about a year and a half ago, stopped all of their Transformer stories and then rebooted with a fresh continuity. So everything that we've talked about as far as like Last Stand of the Wreckers and Lost Light technically no longer counts towards continuity.
Which is kind of a shame.
It really is. The original IDW series, in my opinion, not Lost Light, but their Transformer series, got kind of mired in these weird crossover stories. They tried to make Transformers part of the same universe as G.I. Joe, Mask, Visionaries, and a couple other things. And I think it really, I don't want to say dragged it down, but I think they got lost in the story.
I think they need more time to flesh out the idea instead of rushing it through, because we've read the Mask line, and the way they got the vehicle seems pretty ingenious when compared to when we get Transformers involved, but I
think the problem isn't necessarily the Transformers part of the equation, though. I think the problem is all the other stuff they were crossing over with. Besides G.I. Joe, Hasbro didn't really have a whole lot of toy lines with very fleshed out stories that it required IDW to make it up. And I know they did their best, not saying that they half-assed it, but the stories of like Mask and Visionaries was never quite as well conceived as what G.I. Joe and Transformers had. So when all these characters are mixed in and now they're part of the continuity and ongoing storytelling of Transformers, not that these characters show up all the time, but that you have to acknowledge all this, you have to figure out how to make it fit. And I think it made Transformers' eventual story towards the end of IDW's first run a little too bloated.
Yeah, no, I thought what Joe Transformers passing is like a logical next step, but Visionary seems way out there.
The miniseries itself read well, but the problem is that I don't know where they were introduced at. I think it was at a special event book of some sort. So by the time I picked up the miniseries, the Visionaries were already trying to form a colony on Cybertron, which I didn't have enough motivation to go back and dig for where they were introduced, so I was just kind of left with this storytelling gap that I could never get over while I was reading the series. We reviewed some of the subsequent IDW comics, and I don't think they're as inspired as what came before.
Seems rather mired in the politics of the world.
Well, I'm not going to say mired in the politics, but I think Hasbro has a more definitive vision as to what they need from IDW as storytellers rather than before. I think IDW had a lot of creative freedom to just create a world for the Transformers. Then this other stuff unfortunately got thrown in that they had to add.
Thank you, Hasbro.
Yeah. And now they have this new series that is more in line with what Hasbro needs, but at the same time it doesn't feel like IDW is able to run with a concept and create fun stories necessarily, but they're trying to create stories within this particular continuity Hasbro's trying to tell. You know, there are times that stuff like that works and times it doesn't. And unfortunately this time around it feels more like writers are working around a preset story. So, yeah, in my opinion, if you want pinnacle Transformer storytelling, it's the Lost Light series. I would go back and read that. I have the entire collection digitally, and I still flip through it every now and again just for the fun of it. But I'm weird. Hey, at least I'm aware of it. Do you have any Transformer stories you flip through for fun?
I sometimes toss in the movie every now and then. The 86 movie. I have to be very specific there.
I know. The 1986 animated film. There was somebody on my Facebook feed that said that she was having a good day. She went to Taekwondo practice, she sat down and played some Breath of the Wild, watched the 1986 Transformers film, and hung out with her boyfriend. And I was very honest when I said, I still watch that, but I don't think I could sit there and watch it with you because I'd sit there and do nothing but make fun of it. And then she posts back, that's part of the fun!
We spent a whole night doing that.
Yes, but we did it very specifically.
We came up with some interesting ideas.
Yeah, the relationship between Galvatron and Cyclonus now needs more explanation, thanks to us. But that's a story for another day.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
It was interesting going back to look at all this, though. Yeah, Jesse, I know you're a long-term Transformers fan. If you ever get a bug up your rear to just read some comics, go ahead and read the first IDW run of Transformers, like all the miniseries and the one-shots, because they're very interesting spotlights on particular characters and storylines. And then if you feel like skipping the main series and then just reading Lost Light, I would golf clap for that. I think you'd have a lot of fun with that.
I'll look into it.
Okay. Hopefully next week Joanna will be feeling better because we need her to do Once and Future with us, and I am itching to talk about that series. Because I think it has some high points and low points I would love to get your guys' opinion on and figure out if I'm anywhere in the ballpark. So, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this little retrospective. Next week it should be Once and Future by Boom Studios. Thank you again. Have a great one. I am Jeremy.
And I am Jesse.
The Cosmic Library is now closed.